Welcome to my nice and quick review of the 5+1 popular Path of Exile League Starter Builds for 3.22 Trial of the Ancestors League. These builds are currently trending on YouTube, so you will probably come across them, and maybe, hopefully, maybe I will save you some time. Who knows? Use the chapters in the timeline of the video to fast forward if you're time poor or lack the attention span. Firstly and most importantly, I respect all of the content creators and PoE build makers featured in this and any of my other review videos, and links to the original videos are always provided in the description of my video. I will, however, tell you quite honestly how their video narrative is perceived by someone who is deliberately maintaining an absolute beginner's viewpoint, someone who is not familiar with Path of Exile too much, and that's how I make my assessment, based on that. Without any further ado, let's jump into our first featured build today. It is the Lightning Arrow Deadeye by Crouching Tuna. Spoiler alert, we're looking at two Lightning Arrow builds today for a good reason. Stick around. Now, what is not to like about this build? Let's jump straight into this and we will talk about what's to like about it as well. PoB, the Path of Building import, is created by Crouching Tuna via Maxroll GG. If you like reading articles on the website, you'll be okay and you'll say, Gyro, what are you complaining about? But I like when POBs, when the import strings are being linked quickly and easily on something like POBB.in, POB.in, which I personally found kind of unnecessary, and like Crouching Tuna was sending us or forcing us to take some scenic route before I could get my hands on the POB. I didn't enjoy that. POB itself is rather basic, especially if you compare it to the next Lightning Arrow build example we'll talk about. It has no nodes and it's only broken down into early, mid and late end game, which won't help people leveling their characters. The author says that it's an easy build, and I have to agree that the play style of the build is easy. That's a good thing. Yes, for sure, that's what makes it very popular. But before you get to that easy part, and because you're a beginner and because you might not understand all the damage synergies, elemental damage synergies that need to be maintained to make this build work, it is not the easiest or most straightforward build, I have to tell you. As a person who plays like a casual and makes builds for casuals, I would say that this build is a good example of one that I just couldn't be bothered with. Too many finicky things. There are much more straightforward builds, and one of them I will give you in this video a little bit later, in a few minutes. So yeah, that's what I have to say about this build. But there are a lot of good things about it, otherwise Lightning Arrow wouldn't be so crazy popular as it is right now these days. So it looks like one of the best mapping builds that are detailed and ready for you to download for 3.22 Trial of the Ancestors League. There are a lot of them, like I said at the beginning of the video, but Lightning Arrow seems to be prevalent. There are just so many variations of this build. That's a good thing. It has definitely attractive end gameplay style, with if a bow and arrow, like running around and shooting, is your thing, really. It's not everyone's thing, but if it is your thing, it definitely is very attractive. And it looks like quite a lot of fun. And I personally leveled a version of this build, not from Crouching Tuna though, and not in this league. So I did have fun with it at first, but then it started feeling lacking when my gear started kind of falling behind a little bit. Now, over to build number 2, and kind of smooth transition here, because it's another Lightning Arrow Deadeye for perspective for you, but this time made by the creator by the name of Big Ducks. The bad thing about this build and about this instance of the build is that this version of Lightning Arrow build came across to me as slightly more complex, even more complex than the one from the Crouching Tuna, as Big Ducks relies on rage mechanic generation in addition to the needs to craft the right equipment the right way, etc, etc. It's a more complex build, and the way Big Ducks presents it kinda, I think, I would dare say, it would scare the beginners away. Yeah. The POB nodes also are there, and they give you some of the essentials, so that's what makes them a little bit better. That's a good thing, yeah, but they will not hold your hand as much as some other POB nodes will. Big Ducks also as a creator, he's quite an expert, but he narrates his video kind of just like in a very sort of run ahead, not pause for anything, doesn't try to explain things. He just kind of just assumes, he has a curse of knowledge, what's called a curse of knowledge. He just runs ahead assuming that people know a lot about Path of Exile, or people who don't simply don't exist. And the entry point, skill entry point into the game, as you know, is really high, really steep. So if you're a veteran of the game, you'll be alright. But if you're a beginner, prepare to be really frustrated and not being able to follow Big Ducks' narrative. You've been warned and you are welcome. The good thing about the build is that, first of all, everything good, fun, clearing speed, all this power in the end game if you built it right, all of that still applies, as I said about the first build here. But PoB also, I have to add to this particular instance of Lightning Arrow build, PoB is very detailed per act of game leveling. So this PoB particularly is going to make life of leveling beginners easier than the first one. On to build number 3, it's a cold DOT damage over time Elementalist by Tripolar Bear. What is not to like here? Well, not too much not to like here, to be honest with you, other than it is a damage over time build, aka it doesn't have that instant oomph of damage feedback that a lot of us enjoy, or that the Lightning Arrow would give you, for example. And until you've built up your damage substantially, until you've followed the build quite a bit, yeah, not from the beginning, you will kinda inadvertently feel slower, much slower. You will have to wait until the damage ticks to kill the enemies, especially the bosses, which shouldn't be too noticeable on, you know, or on trash in the early game, because they're all popping very quickly, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But you will notice it later in the game, unless you are doing amazing job keeping up with the talent build, the passive skill tree, which I assume you would, and with the right gear, which is always a challenge for newbies. The particularly good things about this build: it's very nice, properly easy, and much more pleasantly narrated League Starter Guide as a video than the previous two. I'm sorry to the other creators, that's just the truth. Much easier to build this particular character, and it is a lot less reliant on crafted gear with complex elemental damage synergies. It's just all about the cold. PoB, also Path of Building, is accessible and on a better side of the detailing spectrum, if I'm honest with you, compared, once again, I'm sorry, to the previous two builds featured today. It is a nice build, and I actually would recommend it to absolute beginners of Path of Exile. Build number 4, and it is a fun build, alright. Guardian Summon Raging Spirits League Starter by the real James Humphrey. What is not to like about it? Well, the personality. You will either love James or you will hate him, how he makes and narrates his videos. I'm sorry, again, it's subjective, but it is what it is. I personally get the dad jokes and old TV commercial style narrative, but those screen transitions every 5 seconds, no pauses to take a breath and let us actually understand what's going on, is obviously part of James's style, and I personally quite like it, but I have to warn you that you might hate it and also might have an epileptic fit in the process while watching his original video. You have been warned. Also, it has probably the worst PoB notes that I've seen in a while. Sorry, James. It has the most confusing lineup of skill gems with 3 Summon Raging Spirits in one group, for example. Go figure what that is for. There are a lot of good things about this build. It works, and if you are a PoE fan, you will want to try it, and that is a positive. If you play for a long time, you get tired of basic builds, and this is definitely out there. The build is unusual. That's a very good thing about it. That's why I'm including it here. It's not mainstream like everyone rolling Lightning Arrow or Righteous Fire for that reason. It is a build that is a breath of fresh air, and if you're looking for one to try something new, it definitely is going to entertain you. I would not try this build as a League starter as a first one that you will ever make. So if you're really new to Path of Exile, I would not recommend this build. However, I would recommend it if you are already one of the veterans who are a bit tired of, I don't know, Toxic Rain, Lightning Arrow, and that kind of stuff. Build number 5 is Toxic Rain. Speaking of Toxic Rain, Pathfinder by Zizaran. Alright, what's not to like about this build? Let's get that out of the way. And it is you either love Zizaran's guides and his style, most people do, that's why he's popular, or you don't love them. I am personally a swinging vote, as they say, and it depends on a few factors for me. It is another damage over time build with noticeably slower damage uptime, as the toxic pods that you shoot need to have a chance to land and explode and start taking damage on your enemies before you see any particular effect from that shot, I suppose. It is also an old school and some might say rather boring build, especially if it's not your first PoE League rodeo, aka the fun factor of this build is relatively low. And it is an important thing for some of us, just like the opposite to the build from the real James Humphrey that we just discussed. The good, it is a high overall damage and very low overall complexity build, which makes it an amazing league starter, and I very much like that. We have to point this out. Also, Zizaran's guides are among the best in the industry. They are very well structured, credit where it's due. He hits every point, including the upfront pros and cons of the build, just like I do here for you, which I personally appreciate a lot. Zizaran is also one of the best producers of detailed path of building imports. His notes are amazing. They literally answer every question imaginable. They hold your hand in the decision making, and I would have never had enough patience to produce such detailed digital documents, but he does, which is a massive plus for you if you don't know what you're doing. And now on to my little honorable mention, build number 6, Righteous Fire Juggernaut, from yours truly, Gyrotex Gaming, heavily inspired and reliant on the bare bones of Righteous Fire Juggernaut build by Pox Kappa. Link to my step-by-step leveling guide. It's not just a PoB import, it's a leveling guide that will hold your hand from level 1 to the start of the end game is in the description. What is not to like about my build, and yes, of course, there are not so amazing things about it, and I'll tell you straight away, it is the relatively low quality of my path of building imports. I typically only can be bothered creating PoBs that show you the bare bones of what you need, such as the skill gems and the progress through the passive skill tree. But I can't be bothered writing long notes. I write some though, yeah, I do. And my damage numbers, most importantly, never add up to anything remotely impressive or real, because I don't know what I'm doing wrong exactly with PoB tool, but I'm not picking the right gear templates. I can't be bothered making sure that everything adds up or every tick box is ticked there or whatever. So it looks like the damage sucks while it doesn't. So don't trust the numbers. Trust the process, especially if you're a beginner. Righteous Fire builds also have noticeably slower bossing compared to mapping. It doesn't clear maps instantly either, like some Lightning Arrow does or even Arc Witch does, but you just run through the map like an eraser. I like that personally. But on bosses you more or less have to stand nearby and watch them slowly burn, especially if they are already higher end game bosses that have a lot of resistances. So this might not be inspiring for some players, and I honestly don't blame them. Also, some of you might complain that I personally, me Gyro, I have not leveled my builds high enough for you to take them seriously. Like, I've leveled 3 different Righteous Fire characters to high level 80s, so I think my highest one is 87, but I've never done higher, and I didn't kill bosses like Shaper with it, and I don't care, and neither do the beginners or casuals who are here to have fun in PoE while Diablo 4 keeps sucking. You might not like that though, so who knows, but I honestly acknowledge that. The good thing about this build is a particular playstyle, like that some of you like me would love and others might hate. You just run around and everything burns around you. It has amazing defenses with almost zero time investment and zero monetary investment from you. You get that kind of out of the box as you build your character. This character is very hard to kill as long as you've done the most basic level of homework. And this is it, my friends. I could refer you to another honorable mention number 2, which is my take on Minion Army Necromancer build, but I'm running out of time here and you're running out of attention span for one video, I'm sure. So why don't you give this video a little like, subscribe for more videos from me, and go check out my channel if you want more deliberately simplified and very beginner friendly guides for 3.22 Trial of the Ancestors and the previous Path of Exile leagues. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you next time.